911 operator Harris, where is your emergency?
I don't know what's happening. Somebody kicked in the door inside my girlfriend.
Breonna Taylor was one of the most prominent deaths by police in 2020.
Is she alert and able to talk to you?
No, breathing.
And when we were looking into the issue of police accountability, we were struck by the warrant that was used in that particular case.
And when you see the visuals on Breonna Taylor's home, it's like a war zone.
We wanted to know more about how often those kinds of warrants were used and how often it led to kind of fatal tragedies.
According to an examination by the Post, Breonna Taylor was one of at least 22 civilians in the U.S. killed by police carrying out no-knock warrants since 2015. It's still disputed whether or not police knocked and announced their presence at Taylor's home. While they had a warrant to enter without warning, police say they knocked and announced their presence several times. But most of Taylor's neighbors and her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, who was inside during the raid, said they did not hear the officers identify themselves.
The no-knock warrant, when it came into vogue, was through the height of what is commonly referred to as the war on drugs. One of the primary illegal drugs being trafficked in our communities was crack cocaine.
Called crack. It's going nationwide, especially among the young.
Well, crack cocaine is very easily destroyed. The other component to that was that many of the traffickers did have a history of violence and did have frequent access and or possession of weapons. So the no-knock warrant was developed in the interest of hoping to improve officer safety as well as prevent the destruction of evidence.
These high-risk searches were meant to be used sparingly. They've now become common practice for drug squads and SWAT teams.
The counter to that is that far, far more often than not, they're being done successfully. We don't have outcomes that are rising to the level of media scrutiny or public concern. Having said that, these are not a tool to be used as a matter of routine, that they should be used only in extreme cases.
The Kentucky Attorney General's office explained why a no-knock warrant was issued on Taylor's home.
Like the warrant itself is to try to find illegal drugs, drug paraphernalia, and money.
The Fourth Amendment protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. So, in order to enter homes without warning, police are required to get a judge's approval.
Typically for search warrants, police need to fill out an affidavit, which is a sworn statement where they list all of the details about the surveillance they've conducted, about any controlled drug buys, and the reasons why they think they need a no-knock. They're supposed to be justifying the risk that they're taking.
On the affidavit to search Taylor's home, Detective Joshua Janes said he verified through a U.S. postal inspector that Taylor's ex-boyfriend was receiving packages related to alleged drug activity at her address. An internal investigation later found the statement to be false, and Janes was fired. In an interview with the Post, Janes said he didn't lie, but was instead relying on information conveyed by a fellow officer. He is appealing his termination in court.
There are a number of instances we've seen, including the Breonna Taylor case, where officers are accused of lying on these affidavits and providing false information. We looked at hundreds of affidavits, and there were so many that had problems there. They were missing basic information. Some were missing signatures from the actual officers who were supposed to be swearing that everything was true. We found cases where they had wrong addresses, where they didn't list if there were children living there, and there were templates where they just would pre-populate without really specific information about why that house needed to be targeted, who were the people inside, and what were the criminal histories.
And we also found that sometimes these judges will sign off on warrants with very little information that might not actually explain why they need a no-knock.
Judges are the ultimate gatekeepers, the last line of defense before police can break down your door.
Judge Mary Shaw of the Jefferson County Circuit Court signed the warrant on Taylor's home. She declined to comment due to a pending federal investigation.
I think what we came away with was realizing just how easy it is for police to carry out one of the most aggressive and intrusive forms of policing. We learned how accountability is flawed at every level.
The person I feel like I blame the most will have to be the guy who wrote the warrants. I feel like you are to be blamed the most because you wrote these warrants and you knew nothing about her. They didn't know that there were multiple people that lived there. I lived there, Kenny lived there, my goddaughter lived there a lot too. Like, y'all didn't know anything. I could have been home that night.
The police failed on so many levels, starting from the search warrant application process, all the way through the last gunshot that was fired.
The Post obtained documents listing evidence for 12 fatal raids. In 11 of them, officers recovered less than 3 pounds of illegal drugs combined. No drugs were found in Taylor's home.
Breonna Taylor!
What we've seen, especially in the wake of Breonna Taylor's case, are communities and states that are deciding to ban no-knock warrants altogether or restrict them.
We heard a lot during Breonna Taylor's case. No amount of dope is worth a human life.
That's why I'm here today.
In September 2020, the city of Louisville announced a $12 million settlement with Taylor's family. The settlement did not include an admission of wrongdoing by the city or police, and no officers were charged in Taylor's death. A federal investigation into whether Taylor's civil rights were violated is ongoing.